if we look at the uniqueness of our consciousness, let's say, we really see that every individual person has some kind of unique energy in some way. So money is really an efficient way to move those unique energies between humans, let's say. I think at this point I've actually built some kind of catalog of asking myself the quote-unquote silly basic questions, at least with myself. But I think this specific question has led me into other branching questions, deeper ones that actually scratch, let's say, the surface of reality. And so the first thing to understand with regards to money, I think, is to take a counterexample of a moneyless society, and then we can try to understand the example and see where the money can come in and fill the voids of this moneyless society. Afterwards, we can actually define our way from there. Now, if we imagine a moneyless society and say I'm a shoemaker, for example. So say one day I need a pair of socks. So in order for me to go to a socks maker and actually get those socks, I would have to provide a service first. To incentivize or to give the socks maker a good enough reason for him to give me his socks, because otherwise he would just consume it himself and that's it. But I would need to go to the socks maker and actually make them give me their socks. And so I would need to provide the service without any prior resources, because I don't have money. After we actually agreed to make this exchange, we'd have to also, another layer of it, see how many pair of socks are equivalent to a pair of shoes, for example. So there are two layers first. So the first is that mutually need each other's services, and then the second layer is to actually define how many of that service or how much of that service is actually needed for each side. So how many pair of socks is equivalent to one pair of shoes, and etc. So to put this example of a moneyless society into context, we see that in order for that exchange to actually happen, both parties actually need to mutually need each other's services. And the second layer to it is that both parties need to actually know the measurement with which they can make that exchange. So for example, the shoemaker has to know how many pair of socks are actually needed or are actually equivalent to one pair of shoes, for example. And so if we take this example one step further and actually imagine a moneyless Starbucks, for example, that Starbucks would have to assess every customer, whether they have a service that Starbucks actually needs in order for the exchange to happen. And then the second layer to it is that they would have to, even if they accept the customer's service, they would have to assess how much of that person's service is actually equivalent for a cup of coffee, for example. And you can see the process getting exponentially complex with different customers, because all people in an economy can come with different kinds of services. And so to put those examples into context and try to exclusively illustrate where money completes the pieces, we see that in the moneyless Starbucks example, money would come along in the middle and say that the services does not need to be needed by both sides in order for the exchange to happen. So in the moneyless society example, we saw that both parties needed to need each other's service in order for the exchange to happen, because there isn't no medium of exchange in the middle. But in the case of money, only one side needs to need the service in order for the exchange to happen. So the customer would come along and give Starbucks this medium of exchange, which is money, and then the customer would tell Starbucks that this specific medium of exchange would give you access to everything in the economy, or everything that other people would make, assuming that other people are actually consenting to this medium of exchange. So that's how money actually solves the first layer of the problem. Then the second layer of the problem would be the measurement problem, as we mentioned. So in a moneyless society, Starbucks had to actually assess every single specific individual service and then see how much of that service is equivalent to a cup of coffee, for example. But in a money-driven economy, Starbucks would just have to assess how much of that universal medium of exchange is equivalent to a cup of coffee, for example. Now, obviously, this process of a money-driven economy is not going to be perfect, but the process becomes much more efficient when it comes to trading and exchanging stuff. So if we take this whole process and try to define what money is, we see that at the first instance, for example, in the shoemaker example, the person had some kind of knowledge and they tried to harness that knowledge into building a shoe. So in that process, we see some kind of channeling of energy, let's say. So the first layer would be harnessing some kind of energy, and then the second layer would be the desire to actually exchange that energy. So money in some fundamental sense is a representation of energy. So the first instance would be energy, the second one would be exchange of that energy. So money would come in the middle and actually find some efficient way of actually moving that energy from one individual to another. Because if we look at the uniqueness of our consciousness, let's say, we really see that every individual person has some kind of unique energy in some way. So money is really an efficient way to move those unique energies between humans, let's say. And so to reiterate on the model we previously mentioned, we can say that money is a medium of exchange, or in fact a universal medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of measurement. And all those three things, as we said, is based on the fact that we can harness some kind of energy. So those three things actually serve the efficient move of energy between humans, let's say. So that's how I think about it. So money in some sense is a representation of energy. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you find this video beneficial, and see you next time.